Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and boy, I'm really excited to talk to our special guest today, Mark Biltz. You probably have heard and read and seen a lot about a subject called blood moons. And this has been all over most of the Christian media and even on some of the secular media. Well, Mark Biltz is the founder of El Shaddai Ministries, a well-known commentator on the Feast of the Lord. You perhaps maybe have seen him on Fox Television. He's been there. He's also been a guest on Sid Ross' television broadcast, Prophecy in the News. But now he's made it to the big time because he's on the Dove. And his book is entitled Blood Moons, Decoding the Imminent Heavenly Signs. And so there it is there. Well, Mark, what a joy to have you. And you know, I'm sorry we only got you for one segment. So I can tell first off, we're going to get you back several times so we can get into this. But nice to see you. Welcome to the program. How did you discover this?
Well, thank you so much, Perry, for having me on your program. I discovered this really back in 2008 when I was looking at the Temple Mount at a total lunar eclipse that everyone had seen on the internet, and it just really intrigued me. And I knew that the Lord had said that there would be signs in the heavens. As a matter of fact, in Genesis 1:14, God said he created the sun and the moon to send signs on his feast days. And so I went to NASA's website to see if there were any interesting eclipses, and I saw these 4 blood moons in a row. And then what shocked me is when I saw they fell on the feast days, Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles, 2 years in a row. And then I was even more shocked when I saw that these didn't happen at all in the 1500s, the 1600s, the 1700s, 1800s. And then last century, it happened twice on the feast days, both in 67 and 68 when Israel recaptured Jerusalem, and then right after they became a nation in 48. So it really surprised me.
Wow. So explain to our audience, what is a blood moon?
It's a total lunar eclipse. Sometimes you can have a partial lunar eclipse or what's called a penumbral lunar eclipse. A penumbral doesn't fully cover the moon, and so it doesn't turn blood red like it does in a total lunar eclipse.
All right. So there's 4 of them. That's very unusual to have them. How do they line up coming up this year and next year?
Well, the first one's on tax day, April 15th of this year. And then the next one is October 8th. And then the next year it's on April 4th and September 28th. And what's really fascinating is the last one on September 28th is what's called a supermoon, because the moon's orbit is elliptical. And it so happens it's at its closest point to Earth for the entire year. It's a full moon. It's a total blood moon. And it will be seen in Jerusalem on the Feast of Tabernacles when all the Jews are outside looking up at the sky, which is what they do. They're going to see this giant super blood moon.
Wow. Now, going back, was 1948 the results of a blood moon? Or at least related to it?
Well, I definitely think it was related to it because 1948 they became a nation. And then these 4 blood moons happening on the feast days were 1949, 1950.
Wow. All right. So it obviously, these lunar eclipses line up with something that is very impacting as it relates to Israel's history. And do you have any indication what may be ahead with these blood moons?
Yes, this is what I think is an indicator, but one thing I want to bring out first as well is even in 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, there were solar and lunar eclipses all over the feast days, as well as in 32, 33 AD, there were these eclipses all over the feast days. Now, as far as what they indicate, you know, from a theological point, I tell everyone to put it in their own theological pipe and smoke it like they want. I don't know for sure what's going to happen. Yeah. But I do see, look at the pattern. In the past, it meant a biblically prophetic war in Israel, 1948, a biblically prophetic war in Israel, 1967. There are several biblically prophetic wars that have not taken place yet. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but from the pattern, it looks like there's a good probability that we could see something in the next 2 years. And when you look at what's already going on in the Middle East between, you know, Egypt and Syria and Lebanon and Iran, it really shouldn't surprise anybody.
Well, you know, you said earlier the scripture tells us that there'll be signs in the heavens. So I don't think that the scripture would mention that if, in fact, we weren't to pick that up.
You're exactly right, Perry. In Genesis 1:14, again, God said he specifically created the sun and the moon to send signals or signs on his feast days. And then here Isaiah talks about it, Joel talks about it, in Revelation it talks about it. And then even Jesus says in the Gospels, in Matthew 24 and in Luke, there will be signs in the heavens. The sun will turn to sackcloth and the moon to blood.
All right. This topic is really front and center these days, especially in Christendom. Is Israel reacting to any of this? Is the leadership or the Jewish community, are they reacting to any of this discovery?
Yes, as a matter of fact, this was written up in the Jewish press. You can go online, type in Jewish press and blood moons. You can read about it there.
Wow. All right. So as we move into this, the first one's coming up April 15th. You don't think that would mean the abolishment of the IRS, do you?
Hey, that would be a great sign.
We could only hope, I guess.
Yeah.
So what is April 15th on the Jewish calendar?
Oh, it's going to be Nisan 14, Nisan 15, Passover.
Okay.
That's very important. And what's fascinating is not only are there lunar eclipses, but in 2015 on Nisan 1, okay, now that is the same day of the grand opening of Moses' tabernacle. This is when the fire fell, miraculously and lit the altar. But there's a total solar eclipse on Nisan 1, which begins the religious calendar year, followed 2 weeks later by the total lunar eclipse, followed by another solar eclipse on Rosh Hashanah, or the Feast of Trumpets, culminating with the super blood moon in Jerusalem, the fall on the Feast of Tabernacles.
Wow.
So we have both solar and lunar. Because as you know, Perry, God is always 100% accurate. When I saw these blood moons, I knew that he also said the sun would turn to sackcloth. And so I thought, well, there'd have to be solar eclipses. But the key is when they fall on the biblical calendar. NASA reports there's been 12,000 lunar eclipses over the last 5,000 years, 12,000 solar eclipses. So they're common, but it's not common when they all fall on the feast days in this tight time frame.
Well, and you mentioned earlier there were several periods of time, hundreds of years before these four occurred. So this is very unusual.
Yes, because the last time they occurred, when you had these four blood moons on Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles, if you remember in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Actually, that's when all the Jews were kicked out of Spain on the 9th day of the month of Av. And then you have these blood moons happening 1493, 1494. This is also when they were kicked out of Portugal.
All
so
right.
it's tight. They're tied to Israel.
Okay. For those who don't know, explain the significance of the Feast of the Tabernacles.
The Feast of Tabernacles is huge. It began, God told them in Leviticus 23, Numbers 29, that they had to keep this Feast of Tabernacles to remind them they had to live in tents in the wilderness. And prophetically, I believe what that speaks of is the millennial reign, where God is going to tabernacle with man, again, for 1,000 years. You read about it in Zechariah chapter 14. 3 times it says that when the Lord returns, all the nations that do not come up to Jerusalem with representatives to honor the king, during the Feast of Tabernacles, they'll receive no rain and they get the plague. So this is pretty big. If you read Zechariah 14, 3 times God says these nations that don't keep the Feast of Tabernacles, they're in trouble.
You know, there's this feeling, Mark, that the world condition today, especially the instability there in the Middle East and the hatred against the nation of Israel by its surrounding neighbors, that these blood moons could indicate a significant happening. And I know that you probably have heard all of those. Do you think that that's part of the mix?
I think so. I think the nice thing is this time we have a warning. I mean, typically we don't know what to watch for, but making this connection between what the Lord said of these signs in the heavens and falling on the feast days together, obviously I think this time we're getting a warning that we need to be ready, especially spiritually. I mean, that's the main focus. We need to be ready because I think prophetically things are going to start happening. I think everyone can feel it in the air, even the secular.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any doubt on that. You know what's so interesting is that you have brought this forward, and yet it's been around for centuries, but you've brought it forward. Now it is almost world recognition That is fairly impacting.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing how many people are getting this and they're making the connection. And for me, the biggest thing is we need to be aware of the biblical calendar. Because when I lived in Garden City, Kansas, that was on the time zone between Central Time Zone and Mountain Time Zone, and everyone had to have two clocks because they could go 1 mile and be an hour later, regardless of traffic. So, I think people need to realize we need two calendars because God is going to be using his calendar. See, the one that we use in the world is based on the sun only, and the one that the Muslims use is only based on the moon. But in Genesis, God said, let both of them be used for the calendar. And so I think we need to be aware of God's calendar. We're in the world, so we need our calendar. But if we want to understand biblical prophecy, we need to look at it in terms of God's day timer.
Wow. All right, let me encourage folks to get a copy of it. Forward by Joseph Farah with WorldNet Daily, and then here it is, Blood Moons, the decoding of the imminent heavenly signs. And let me encourage you to get a copy of the book. Mark, I'm sorry I can only have you one segment, but I'm going to get you back because I want to do more on this because everybody's talking about it. And since you're the guy that uncovered it, can we get you back soon?
Hey, you bet, and congratulations. I heard you guys run an award that'll be presented at the NRB.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much. Blessings to you. Let's stay in touch.
All right.
All right, God bless. We'll be right back.